want to have by 2030 no private property for anybody. And they make it seem like that's going to be a really great thing.
The thesis that we have going here, basically we're looking at a 9 or 10-year walk. How can we go from a system where people are owning things in America, consumer base, we own, to now moving to this, you don't own anything and everything's a service. The only thing we can really, gauge it on is the past, and it happened in Russia. We saw that happen. I mean, they used the state and just confiscated. I mean, they went in with thugs and just, you no longer own this. We're taking it.
Yeah,
And they did that in China.
Right.
Under Mao. That's what Mao did. He just went in and took it.
And then re-educated the people, which was a lot of bloodbath.
And we've seen that. And we've seen that with every communist takeover of a country. In Poland's the same way. I mean, the first thing they do is they decide who's a dissident, who's a rebel, and that's the first property they take. They get rid of their opposition. Once their oppositions are gone, then they get rid of everybody else.
Right.
So then that's obviously the extreme. So then how would we back up to that? Because if our goal is nobody owns anything after 9 or 10 years, how do we get from here to there? What's at the top of ownership? Usually it's a house. That's usually your number one asset if you're not a super rich person.
Correct.
A home is usually your number one asset, followed by like a car, and then, your possessions in your house, and you may then have a 401k. What if you look at this as kind of an incremental thing? Whereas by, let's say, 2030, it would be total confiscation of homes. Where they really started was the goods. And when I mean goods, I mean like as far as food items. And what they wanted to is turn that from a goods-oriented economy to a service-oriented economy.
Well, there's a couple factors. One is by having all of the groceries into a small group, the large grocery stores, not the small ones. We've got Walmart and Publix.
That's about 85. We have Winn-Dixie too.
We have Winn-Dixie, but 85 to 90% of all the groceries sold in Florida are sold through either Walmart or Publix.
So they already have that in place.
So now what happens if they determine that they can't deliver, which has happened?
We saw that.
Eggs. Let's just say they close down production of eggs through natural, or they find that there's a little bug in it or something.
Or I mean, we saw they shut down the pork industry. Remember during the COVID? Industry. I mean, you couldn't find pork.
Yeah.
They were slaughtering pigs.
They can determine which stores get how much, and then the stores can determine which consumers get what and how much. And we're back now to the social credit system. That
they can always, at the moment, they can limit how much you buy.
Correct.
And you're only allowed 2 packages or something at a time.
Well, the thing is that if there's only a few grocers, if that's the term we want to use, then they can record what you buy, when you buy it, how much you buy. As they move out of private property in the United States, you no longer have the right to buy groceries. They will determine what amount of right you have for the amount of food that you eat, because remember, I've already tried this under a previous administration of what foods are good for you.
Well, the next step would be is if they mandate everybody to be on these systems, whatever it is, then there's going to be a master database somewhere.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so once you're in a master database, then and each one of these grocers are tied to this master database, when they're scanning all your products,
Correct.
it could easily pop up, hey, they're past their limit. They can't have any more of this.
That's the point.
They're not allowed to have this.
Correct.
And then the person that's scanning that would have to say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have this. And they'd have to pull that out of the out of your purchase.
We know that one of the goals is to eliminate cash, because if cash is eliminated, then it is all done by card, national card. The credit cards now are controlled by a few, and those could be merged to determine how much food you buy, how much clothing you buy. We can go down the list, but their goal, again, let's not forget what their goal is. Their goal is to eliminate as much private property as possible in the next 9 to 10 years.
The point on the energy is, on the smart meters, is they can start now regulating, because again, who controls the smart meter? The energy company. The energy company can literally go into your thermostat and turn it down to 60 if they want, or turn it up to 80.
Well,
and then you have no override capability, none, zero. You give them authority. Well, what happens if all cars are electric? No more gas combustion engine. And then all of a sudden they shoot up the price of electric. Well, you can operate a car, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. You can have the freedom of driving your own car, but it's a lot cheaper if you just use public transportation or you use the driverless Uber that will be out there. Because again, they're going to get rid of people driving it. They're going to be driverless cars. What happens if we have a major catastrophe or perceived catastrophe or crisis or health crisis, and they say, you know what? Everybody's shut down. We give you $2,000 a month. That's it. Or $4,000 or whatever it is. So you go from making a lot higher and having disposable income to barely getting by,
or not getting by,
Well,
and losing your house, losing your car.
And all of a sudden you just don't have money to buy things anymore. Well, that's a good way to get off consumerism real quick.
Yeah. It's a good way
to go down to basics.
And you also
lose
private property.
You start selling your things just to stay, survive. And then you can't, buy things off Amazon because you can't afford it. I mean, that's what you did have, because we're a consumer nation. One of the things that happened during COVID is the spending on Amazon just went through the roof. Part of it is because people were bored. And then if you can prolong that, because how you would do that would be okay, cold turkey it. And then there's a time period where people have to adjust. I mean, this is psychology. Honestly, this is psychology. Cold turkey it. You don't even have a choice. You can't even spend it because you can barely make it. You're relying on the government to give you whatever pittance they can give you so you can survive. And then if you do that for a year or 2 years or 3, the longer you go on that, the more you get used to that. And the more, then it just becomes, that was something in the past, because you don't ever see a future anymore where you're buying anything, because that's no longer your present. And now you're used to it. And now that's how you can function. And that's how I think they're going to do it. They got to break us. Before the progressive income tax, People own property, literally, right? Most people own property. The title to their house, their land, they owned. I mean, if you look at the structure of America prior to 1913, what you had families that owned land. You know, they'd siphon off a portion of the land and then give it to their sons and daughters or whatever, sons-in-laws. And so what would happen then? You'd start out a new family. You didn't have debt because you owned the land. You had title to the land. Land was the key. Property was the key. And then what did you do? You passed that on in an inheritance to your family members. And then that was passed from family to family to family. And that was that was the legacy of the family, was the land. You know, didn't matter what you did in life, you always had the land. You had the homestead. And then what we saw in 1913, when they had the progressive income tax that they introduced, and then going forward over the next 100 years, what did they introduce? An inheritance tax. Why do they have an inheritance tax? Well, people would have to sell their property just to pay the tax to the government. And that happened over and over. I mean, look at all the farms. The farmer would die and the family didn't have money to pay off the taxes because of the inheritance tax. And so what they have to do? They had to sell off the land. But again, this was something they planned. Then you add the fact of major inflationary period that they started out after the 50s, started in the 60s. They started ramping up the inflation of our dollar, devaluing our dollar. Now we get to what happens with the homes, because again, we know they want to get to the point where nobody owns homes except the state. The state already owns the mortgages through Fannie, Freddie, FHA, and VA. It's 90% of all loans are owned by the state by either a quasi state-run, company or the state and VA or FHA. How do they get from here we are in 2021, where 60% of the people own homes, single-family homes, to 2030 where nobody owns a home? Is that even realistic?
Obviously, the easiest, quickest way is to withdraw the income that people make to pay the payments.
Then you still have a portion of the people that have 401ks or investment income.
The 401ks, that can easily be confiscated. If there were a good reason or manufactured reason, 401ks in this country could be confiscated overnight.
It's a misnomer to think that everybody's equal, because that's not the case.
No,
and it's not everybody's equal. It's 90% is equal. 10% are the overseers. Because when they say everybody will not own a home, they really don't mean everybody. They just mean 80 to 90% of the people won't own homes and like it. Yeah, if they get what they want.
Yeah.
Because they're part of the system. They're part of the elite.
Well, you look at the various countries that are under the system, and all of them, the elites own property. The rest don't.
Well, that's what communism was in Russia, USSR. I mean, they had their own lanes. Yes. They had their own commissaries where they had the best foods that they can get. They had their own lanes on the highway. They had everything. It was, if you were part of the Communist Party, you had special treatment.
Correct.
And that's the same in China. If you're part of the CCP, which, by the way, is a small percentage of the people, because again, they have to control those people.
Right.
And you have to follow the certain rules. And as long as you do that, you're part of the elite. And that's what they want to do across the world.
Well,
so there will be people here in America that are part of the elite, part of the 10%, and they'll own property.
We're already seeing that in certain states where the governorships and the people that are at the top, attorney generals, governors, they require certain things for the people, but they don't follow them themselves. I mean,
So
we
like
could
the
give
mayor of New
example
York?
after example. Yeah, mayor of New York.
Mayor of New York.
Governor of California.
Nobody could go to Times Square, but I can.
Yeah. And we on the outside look at that and says, wow, how do they let them do that? But again, we're right back to the system that is being set up on a progressive basis in the United States to model after China, after the Soviet Union, after other countries. And that's what they want. That's where they're headed. Coming January 21st, we're going to see that in play because we'll have a one-party system, and that one party will put in whatever they want, and we will have very little power to make the change. Till or unless God steps in and does something about it.
You call yourself a free spirit, a wild thing, and you're terrified somebody's going to stick you in a cage. Well, baby, you're already in that cage. You built it yourself.